Stacey, Conroy, what's up?
Not much. How are you?
Doing well. Good to see you.
You too.
Welcome once again, everyone, to our once a month OCD and SUD webinar, where we talk about all things OCD and some things related to substance use as well, too. Stacey, you want to tell everyone about our OCD SUD SIG that we've got going
on? We have the OCD SUD Special Interest Group as part of the IOCDF Special Interest Groups. We have a website, which is www.ocdsud.com. It's pretty easy to remember if you're looking for OCD SUD info. And there we have various videos, resources, information, past presentations, linked to previous webinars here on this channel. And as we get more information, we post it. So.
And I always like to say SUD is substance use disorder, because someone always says, what's SUD? And I'll say substance use disorder. So we'll just say that right now. And I put it in the chat as well. So that,
and especially since some people use it as subjective units of distress in OCD treatment, which is an older term, but still I find floats around every once in a while.
SUDs. Also a nickname for beer back in the 30s. SUDs.
SUDs.
Yeah. A bottle of SUDs. Yeah. So
a term I heard first in the movie The Shawshank Redemption.
Shawshank Redemption, exactly. I think a man is more of a man if he's got a bottle of SUDs in his hand.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Mm-hmm. Love that movie so much. All right. Sat says, when you use ERP, you fall into a cycle of using OCD to get rid of OCD. Well, that ain't going to help. I mean, I'm just going to tell you that right now. That's not going to really be helpful. In other words, the ERP turns into another type of OCD. Any advice on how to avoid that pitfall? Stacey, did you ever have that in your own OCD work, where OCD interfered with OCD treatment?
Yeah, in the terms of the fact that I had all these thoughts that it wasn't working or I wasn't doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just, you start thinking, I have to do this, I have to do ERP right. I have to do it this many times. No, you don't. You can do it imperfectly. Perfect.
Yeah.
But mostly, a lot for me is just one thing feeding in on the other. Because OCD attacks what's most important to you. So if you're really invested in your treatment and you are thinking about it and you want to do it right, it's probably going to come after that process. And I see that a lot in OCD treatment and those who are doing OCD and SUD treatment, where you end up saying, oh, I have to do the meetings perfectly, or I have to do step work or homework, or do a moral inventory perfectly, or get into the moral inventory so deeply that it actually becomes more of a problem than the help that it's supposed to be as part of your SUD journey. So.
Yeah. I could see that happening.
Yeah.
Have you ever worked with someone who's afraid, let me put it up there, that if they didn't do their compulsions, that their anxiety would not stop until the compulsion was done perfectly? Yes, absolutely.
What time is it?
Yeah. Maybe 17 times already today. I don't know. We see this, I'll just give one example. Well, I'll see this a lot in scrupulosity, where people are afraid if they don't say a prayer perfectly, then the prayer will be rejected by the higher power. And then it'll have to be said over and over again until it's accepted as perfect. And of course, when you have OCD, this goes back to the previous question as well, too. When you have OCD, of course, you're not going to believe that you're going to be able to do it perfect. And so you're going to try to do it perfect, which is a compulsion, right? So now here's OCD interfering with OCD. Well, the only way to do it, to get rid of me, is to do this perfectly, which then sets you up for failure and everything. So,
yes.
So, yeah.
and the same conversation I've had with people I've worked with is that if I don't do my recovery from SUD perfectly, then it's not going to work. So people become very compulsive and obsessive about the rules of, say, a 12-step program or smart recovery. And that makes it more problematic. And then they don't want to engage in it because they over engage in it. It becomes a compulsion.
Yeah.
Sort of like reading, your religious text can become a compulsion to find the right answer or be, religious enough. You can read the AA big book or the NA big book or smart recovery book, too many hours a day trying to get it right. That's not the way it was intended.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do we deal with the real life concerns and continue practicing ERP and sitting in uncertainty? Real life concerns that are legitimate, like checking hotel rooms to ensure there are no bed bugs. Well, I don't care if you do a quick check for something, right?
Yeah.
Like that.
Totally do.
But you don't have to do it more than once, right? And you don't have to do it more than lift up and see nothing. Okay, great. You don't have to pull out a magnifying glass. You don't have to call a friend over and say, I'm doubting something. Could you check it for me and confirm something of that nature, right? So, I even look at like COVID where they talk about a 20-second hand wash. Great. OCD owns the 21st second though. Anything beyond that is now in the realm of OCD. So there are real life concerns. Of course there are real life concerns. There are things that are legitimate, but you don't have to make them compulsive in your looking into them or checking them, right? You can do it once and be done and move on. Anything beyond that, now we're getting into that realm of OCD.
Yeah, you don't want to give up on things that you should do, like check for bed bugs in a hotel. Like I don't know that I would not do that.
I
Or
don't
wash.
know that I ever have done that, but okay, whatever.
Oh no, I do every single time.
Do you? Okay, I don't, but
Yes. But also like washing your hands or brushing your teeth. Just the 20-second rule: brushing your teeth once.
yeah,
Not to the point where your gums bleed.
right. Checking, if you've had a bunch of people at your house and you want to walk around and make sure the doors are locked before everybody goes to bed, okay, whatever. But yeah, once, right? One time. Anything more than that is owned by obsessive compulsive disorder. If you want to look at your plumbing to make sure that the water's not running, okay, again, because you've had a bunch of people over, but if you then have to go and touch it and assess and listen and all those other things too, OCD coming in, right? If you want to look down the basement stairs to make sure there's no lights on because you don't want to leave the lights on overnight because it's just a waste of electricity, okay. But if you look down and it's dark, but you're like, yeah, but maybe they're slightly on, and so you go down the stairs and you walk through OCD, right? When you're not trusting your senses as they are used, then you're going into the realm of obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yes. And just as I would add that when I ask people what size is their one drink, because people say, well, I have one drink per day, but it's a 32-ounce shot of vodka. I also ask, if you're doing something once, does it take an hour and a half and does it have to be done in a particular order? Because I've had people say, well, I only check everything in my house once.
Mm-hmm.
in a particular order, and it takes me an hour and a half before I can go to bed.
Yeah. I'll go to bed in 2 minutes.
Yeah. I'll go to bed in 30 seconds. Like, I'll fall asleep now if I just like close my eyes and stop paying attention.
I could do the same. Yeah. How do I overcome avoidance behaviors in OCD? Instead of not doing a behavior, I'm trying to do things. For instance, I avoid work for various OCD reasons. How do I do ERP without motivation? I think that's the most important question in that whole situation there. How do we do ERP without motivation? And here's the other piece too. Even if you have motivation, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to do ERP. So let's be honest about that as well too, right? Because I know plenty of people who are motivated who still don't do it. You know, Stacey, I don't know about you, but I sometimes say to people, you're a 4951, which sounds like a police blotter thing, but what I mean by it is this. 49% of you wants to get better, but 51% of you seems to want to stay the same. And what I'd like to do is make you a 51-49, where we have 51% of you wants to get better and only 49% wants to stay the same. That would be the ideal. That's where we would really like to see it go. And
you
so,
don't have to have full buy-in. I mean, I certainly didn't in the beginning. No way. I thought my therapist was a quack.
And yet you did it and you followed the directions?
I did, because what the outcome potentially could be was better than what I had. And at that point, I was ready to have better than what I had. And I'd done a lot of work before I was introduced to ERP. And I've always said that all the other things made me better, but ERP made me well.
Okay. That makes sense. So what you kind of learn in all of this is, you know, ERP works. ERP works very well, but you have to do the ERP for it to work, right? I love people who say, you know, someday when I win the lottery, I'm going to do this. And I'll say, oh, well, how often do you play the lottery? Well, I never play the lottery, but someday when I win the lottery, I'm going to do this. Oh, okay. All right. So we're expecting to win the lottery without playing the lottery. All right. I see how this works. We're not going to get the advantage of doing ERP without doing ERP. And we're going to have to do ERP. And my hope for the motivation would be this. If the life you're living right now is not satisfying to you, and you are offered a chance to have something be different, how willing are you to take that? Now, you would all maybe think, well, yes, we would all take it, but no, not the case. Just because you're offered the chance for something to change doesn't mean you take it, because there's plenty of people who are afraid, but what if the change is worse instead of better? And therefore, do I even want to take the risk? Maybe I don't. Right? And so there are people who do not take the chance, who do not take the risk, and who do not feel motivated to do the ERP out of a fear that while it could get better, maybe it could also get worse, because maybe the devil I know is better than the devil that I don't know.
And that is the same type of conversation that happens in SUD.
Yes, it is.
You know,
Mhm.
the parallels are kind of amazing between the two. They both promise you something they never deliver, and yet the fear of, if I take a chance and engage in treatment, will it be better or worse? And honestly, sometimes in the beginning, it's worse. I did not feel all good and flowery and peaceful in the beginning of my treatment for SUD or ERP.
Mhm.
No, it was some of the hardest work I had ever done in my life. I had a lot of doubts, a lot of questions, a lot of fear and uncertainty. And sometimes you need to trust your treatment providers. Like if I went to an oncologist and they said, "Oh, we're going to do X, Y, and Z treatment," I'd be like, "Okay." But when you go to therapy and you decide that the OCD or the SUD is telling you the truth rather than the therapist who went to school to provide treatment.
Mhm.
So it does surprise me in my therapy work when people are like, "No, I'm not going to do that." I mean, I'll respect your decision and help you with the cost benefit analysis of that decision. But if you went to any medical provider and they said, "Oh, you really have this serious problem, it's going to interfere with, your life," you'd be like, "Okay, you know, I'll do X." But with OCD, why is it that we are so willing to believe the OCD or the SUD that says if you engage in this compulsion or if you use this substance, you'll be better? But when a therapist says, "Hey, if you do this hard, challenging work, you'll be better," we'll believe the OCD and SUD, but we won't believe the therapist.
Mhm.
I believed the therapist, but it wasn't easy. It's not like you walk out the first session going, "Oh, I'm so much better." It takes time.
Mhm. Absolutely.
You know? And the other thing I've said over my career is I've never met anybody who didn't want recovery, but I have met people who didn't want to put in the work for recovery. And those are two different things. You can want it, but you do have to put in the work for it as well.
That makes sense. Yeah. Am I hearing funny noises in your background or
Yeah, you are. That's my VA work phone. It's ringing
Oh.
off.
I
I
was
turned
like,
off my cell phone. I didn't think I'd be getting phone calls from, my full-time work gig at
okay.
18.
Just thought I would check.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure if people could hear it, but
Yeah.
there it is.
Tiffany says, I'm terrified of ERP. I always have a panic attack. Am I not easing into it enough? Well, the first thing that I would say is this. Do interoceptive exposures to overcome your fears of panic and everything first before you even engage in some of the ERP. Because if you're trying to do ERP and you keep having panic attacks, we got to deal with the panic attacks first. And then we'll go ahead and we'll do the ERP to the OCD things.
Okay, Dr. Patrick McGrath, what is I can't even say the word now. I'm going to trip over it.
Interoceptive exposures. All right.
Interoceptive exposures. I know the word. I just need to trip over it.
So there are exposures to panic symptoms where we would have you do things like run in place and hyperventilate and breathe through straws and spin in chairs. And we would have you learn that you could handle uncomfortable physiological sensations, that you don't need to be afraid of those things. What happens in a panic attack is 4 or more sensations occur at the same time and reach a peak rather quickly. And they feel very overwhelming to people. And therefore, people want to avoid anything that might create some of that. So, therefore, what we want to do is we want to teach you not to be afraid of those things so that that stuff isn't so overwhelming to you anymore. That's the goal, right? And when you learn that you can handle those things and they're not dangerous, no one's ever died of a panic attack. No, panic attacks are not dangerous. In fact, think about some of the things that happen in panic. You're dizzy. All right. When you were a kid, you probably had a sit and spin and you thought being dizzy was the greatest thing in the world. So if dizziness was horrible, you would have died as a child, right? And that's just one example of the things that happen during a panic attack, where as adults, we were often so fearful of these things. But when we were younger, we thought those things were amazing, right? So panic is this false alarm experience going off in a situation where it doesn't need to. And it's this activation of all these physiological sensations and the fight, flight, or freeze response telling you to get the hell out of a situation, which you don't actually have to get out of because there isn't actually any danger there whatsoever. So that's what I would do. Michael says, do loop tapes work? How long should they be, etc.? Yeah, they do work. Length will depend on whatever it is that you're recording and things, but I love loop tapes. Have you used them a lot, Stacey? Because I'll tell you, I'm a fan of the loop tape myself.
Yes, no, I have used them, and you're right, depending on the situation. And I've had people who actually use a couple different loop tapes for different themes over the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really just depends. And in fact, there are people who do a compulsion of counting. So I've created random number loop tapes to play while they count, which throws off their counting. I've had people say prayers wrong and record that so that they listen to that while they're praying, so that it throws off their praying. It just depends on the situation. But yeah, you can absolutely do those things. It works out really well. Zach says, what would be good exercises for pure O? Do you just keep repeating thoughts? It could be thoughts, it could be images, it could be urges. All three of those things can happen in a pure O kind of experience. So remember, for everyone, what is pure O? You have obsessions and you do mental compulsions. There's no visible physical compulsions that you're seeing. And so you would want to expose people to whatever the obsessions are. And you might even make a loop tape of those things. And the compulsions might be going on in your head, but they're going to have to fight the loop tape of the obsession playing over and over again now as well, until you get to the point that you're kind of bored with the obsession. Hopefully it doesn't really even bother you anymore. It doesn't even trigger anything anymore for you, because you're like, oh yeah, there's that again. Okay, whatever. And you move on. That's the goal. You want to throw anything else on there, Stacey?
No.
No. You staying awake with us, Stacey? You all right there?
Yeah. Yes. Like I said, I could fall asleep, and I need to pay attention. I was reading comments.
You were reading. Oh, you were reading ahead. All right, go ahead. Pick one. Go ahead. You were probably found something you really liked because you were really enthralled.
No, I did not find one that I really liked, but there was one sort of further back that caught my interest, and that was somebody was asking about mindfulness, and the way the question was framed. Really not going to get into agree or disagree. I'm just going to say mindfulness is a good skill to have, for multiple reasons, in terms of helping you just be present. And that is something that is hard to do when OCD is driving your bus or SUD is driving your bus. And it's a skill that, if you have anxiety and substance use disorder, you're not good with being where your feet are. You are constantly in the past or in the future in your head. And what could be, what happened before, what might happen in the future, but you're never where you're at. So whether you use it, in therapy or in your life, it's a good tool to have in your toolbox. How it fits into your overall therapy is something to discuss between you and your therapist, but overall, the ability to sit with self and sit with uncertainty can be enhanced with learning to be mindful and present.
I don't want to sit with uncertainty, though. I want certainty.
Well, if you find it, let me know. Because I did a lot of looking for it, never found it.
You never found it. Okay.
No.
Mm-hmm.
No. It's kind of like playing the lottery without, or wanting to win the lottery without playing. No.
Steven says, everyone says anxiety is from thoughts, not from reality. How is that true? My anxiety is 100% due to my current financial circumstances. I mean, I would not say that reality plays no role in anxiety at all whatsoever, but there are people in dire financial circumstances who think, well, we'll get out of this and don't feel very anxious about it. And there's others who think, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world and it's awful and horrible, who do feel very anxious about it. So the thoughts definitely play a role in the whole experience as well, right? And as I think about cognitive behavioral therapy, I don't think of anything in isolation. I think about the fact that we have thoughts, we have behaviors, and we have emotions, and they all really kind of are linked to each other, right? So I don't think of one in just isolation. I think it comes as a trifecta in terms of what you're dealing with and how you handle it. Is how do you handle the thoughts, the feelings, and the behaviors together? What else did you like there, my friend Stacey?
Mm. I don't know.
Rachel says, I haven't dealt with OCD for a while, but I can feel it coming back up and want to deal with it before it gets extreme as it used to get. Well, there's a couple of options. If you worked with a therapist, get back in with them and start working on ERP now to make sure that you're getting it taken care of. If you were, you know, if you're on any kind of medication, make sure that you're appropriately taking the meds and doing it in the right way and not playing around with the prescription. Make sure that you're also not taking any substances that are interfering with those medications as well too. Sometimes people try to self-medicate, and that's not a great idea in these situations. But go back to doing what you did when it worked before, because if it worked before, it'll probably work again.
And good for you for noticing it too and being able to say that, because a lot of times when people start to get some recovery, they feel if they reach out for help again or say I need help, that somehow something went wrong or they're, not strong enough or not doing it right. That has nothing to do with it. These are chronic things that react to stress and different circumstances in our life, and they can come back, and sometimes in weird and unexpected ways. I mean, one of my favorite stories was being on a cruise and just having the thought that I was going to jump off the balcony in the middle of the night. I was up all night, like tying my hands in the sheets. I had no idea that that was going to come up, and it really became problematic during the week. You know, I was floored, but also fairly terrified. My brain really got a hold of that one for the whole cruise, and
Wow.
yeah,
Hmm.
and I got stuck in it in weird ways that I did not anticipate in the middle of the ocean.
That's
Um,
kind of fascinating, actually. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, it caught me off guard, but it didn't mean that I wasn't committed to my recovery or other things. Sometimes things can come up, but when you are stressed, you can release stress hormones that can bring up, cravings for substances or increase your OCD symptoms that they may come back for a while, but um, reaching out for help is not a bad thing. I reached out for help many times in my process, particularly when I was doing really, deep therapy work. I would get cravings for substances, and I would bring that up and say, "Hey, this is what's going on with me," and I'd address that. It didn't mean that I didn't want recovery. It just meant that I had some life stressors and some therapy stressors put together, and my brain went, "Oh, we know how to fix this,"
Mhm.
you know. But acknowledging that means you're in a better place already because you know what it is and you can reach out and get the help you need.
Mhm.
Recovery is a process, it's not an event.
I like that. Mhm.
Oh, and there go those weird noises again.
Oh, yes. Somebody really wants to talk to you.
No, actually, what it is, it's an automated system sending me some type of alert for something that's going on at the facility, which doesn't matter to me because I'm at home.
Because
And
you're at home.
one,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So one call is to tell me it's happening. The other is to tell me it's all clear. So hopefully this is the last time it will go off.
You'll like this one, actually, Stacey. What about having a therapist that doesn't fully grasp OCD? My therapist keeps telling me I don't have OCD and these symptoms are caused by trauma only. How do we deal?
Sorry. Yeah, I also have PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very fond of sharing this example. I have themes around harm OCD, and I would get psychoeducation around PTSD. Just because you experience violence doesn't mean you're going to be violent. And, this is something that, is just your mind. It's from your trauma. All doesn't, I would say yes. And I'd smile and nod. I get back on the bus and my brain's like, you're going to stab somebody on this bus. And I never really got a connection with that until I started doing ERP and such. So some people don't spot OCD. Um, I can't diagnose from afar, but it's something you can definitely try to work out with your therapist. But if they don't have training in OCD, they might not see it. I see a lot of people who had a different diagnosis, whether it was, psychosis, delusional disorder, different anxiety disorders, or people say, oh, that's just part of your PTSD. But you can have PTSD and you can have OCD at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. And having lived through part of this, it took a while for the OCD to be identified because the PTSD in the beginning was the raging smoking gun.
This is also a problem in our field where there's a group of therapists who believe that everything is a result of trauma.
Yeah.
And Stacey, we both know people who have not experienced traumas who have OCD. We both know people who have not experienced traumas who have substance use problems as well too.
Yes.
So I think it's a disservice when we try to say that everything is due to some kind of a trauma.
Yes.
Right.
And there can be some overlap if you do in fact have a trauma history, but
Mhm.
OCD can pick up on PTSD and say, "Oh, well, you're concerned about this, you have anxiety about this. This is how you fix it. This compulsion." And you get into compulsions, and that takes more into OCD. Again, they're not mutually exclusive, and sometimes you have to self-educate first.
Yep.
um, you know but you need to make the decision that works for you. And again, can't diagnose from my couch, but you, and if you can't work it out, then explore your options. But the whole point is to be working with a professional to get some treatment and get some recovery going.
Mhm. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So
I didn't have one therapist through my whole journey.
you had
Yeah, that
you had a
yeah,
few, didn't you? Mhm.
I did. And I fired one or two.
There's some discussion in here about confession tonight. People having sensations to confess even slightest things, and even if it hasn't been anything wrong or bad, how do they stand the feeling of not giving in to the confession, right? They know they don't have to, but they feel if they don't, then they might be bad or something like that. if confession works, our standard reply to people with OCD would be, "You're just not confessing enough to everybody." And therefore, if you would just confess more, everything would be fine. Although what would probably happen is the people you were confessing to would get more frustrated with you instead of less, because they probably don't want all the confession going on. And therefore, the more you confessed, the probably the worse everybody else feels, right? Maybe not you, but definitely everybody else. And then after a while, you'll notice that maybe other people are not feeling good. You'll wonder what role you might have played in that. You'll start to confess things about that, and the cycle just goes on and on and on and on and continues, and it makes nothing better whatsoever.
Yes, which is the same type of response that I would give to the question below that. How do I stop feeling the need to look for reassurance?
Hmm.
You know, have you ever gotten the answer from your OCD? Okay, finally, we have received enough reassurance.
Hmm.
No,
I
because
don't know anybody who's gotten that. I don't know,
no,
but mhm.
no. So
I don't think that exists.
it does not.
Hmm.
Just like confessing does not help. If reassurance, as you said, helped, we would tell people you just haven't sought enough reassurance. You haven't checked Dr. Google enough. Go back and do it a few more times. You'll be okay. No, we don't say that because there is no level of reassurance seeking that is going to satisfy OCD.
Hmm. For people who don't have access to ERP, what kind of resources are available to them? Well, the International OCD Foundation has great articles and webinar stuff. No CD, you can check out these webinars. They're online now. If you need to go back and review some things, there's very good self-help manuals and books out there on OCD as well too. So there are various things. There are goal groups and support groups that are run in various cities by various organizations as well too. That might also be helpful to help keep people accountable to doing the ERP work that they want to do as well. Uh, Brainial talks about false memory and doubts that he might have harmed his nephew when driving a motorbike and sitting behind him. Part of course, in a situation like that is you'll want to constantly assess with your nephew if he's okay, with his family, if they think he's okay. There is no, of course, way to satisfy OCD enough to get that feeling of everything is fine and everything is okay. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. And because of that, OCD does love, of course, to go to the worst case scenario, which means, well, he's probably hurt. And even if it's not being manifested now, it will be at some point in the future. And therefore, I'm a bad person and I'm responsible in some way for the harm that's coming to my nephew. So I don't know of anyone who sought the advice of OCD and got a pass or was cleared, right, of things. Uh, I just haven't seen that happen before. It's it's quite the opposite, right?
Yeah, no, it is the biggest time waster I have come across. It does not give answers. It does not solve things. It never accepts anything. It says, well, what if? But what if? And are you sure? two favorite lines are "What if" and "Are you sure?" Well,
Mhm.
what if this? And then you seek reassurance, or you confess, or you do a compulsion, and you say, "See?" And then it goes, "Are you sure?" And it cycles.
Or there's a cousin of that too, which is, "Yeah, but what if?" as
Yeah,
well. Mhm. Yeah.
yeah. But it never gives an answer. And usually it's counterproductive because you have things you want to do in your life that go to work to pay your bills, and your OCD gets in the way of you getting out the door, or getting to work on time, or getting your work done if you have challenges with perfectionism, enjoying time with friends. This will just pull you away from that, and it's the biggest time waster that that you will run into, because it's never satisfied, and it isolates you and pulls you away from the things that you value and that are important to you.
Yeah.
And it's a paradox because it says, oh, if you don't do things perfectly, or you don't complete this compulsion, then something bad will happen, with no evidence. But what happens is you miss out on the important things in life. So yes, something bad happens, you're missing out on the life that you
Yeah.
want and that's important to you.
Yeah. I'm it's not that anybody says this out loud, but it's almost out there as, I'm fine with all the things that OCD causes me to lose out on my life, as long as I don't fear or have the thing that OCD tells me would be the worst case scenario thing happen in my life.
Yes. Yeah, it's okay if it takes over control, wastes my time, pulls me away from my values, my friends, my family, my work, and slows down the things that are important in my life, as long as,
I don't lose my keys.
yes,
You know,
if I, if I lose my keys, then I won't
life's
get to
over.
work, and then
Yeah.
the office will fall
Yeah.
apart, the building
Right.
will implode. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. My family hates me. I've gotten fired, all these other things, but at least I know where my keys are. Right. Um, so that's, and when I say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous, right? I mean, it just, and I don't say it to be flippant. I'm not trying to be that whatsoever, because I'm speaking as if I'm OCD right now, and that's
mhm,
really what OCD thinks. I mean, yeah, it's kind of, it's unfortunate. Maybe you lost your job, and yeah, maybe it's sad your family left. But hey, at least we know where the keys are. So we got that going for us, which is great, because we'll always know where our keys are now. So that's really awesome. By the way, I know that you just checked a minute ago, but you might want to touch your pocket again one more time just to make sure they're still in your pocket, right? And then that's what you'll do, right? But at least, again, you know where they are. So I say that way very purposely to really prove my point, which is, that's all that OCD cares about. Is something as minuscule as where your keys are is so much more important in OCD than anything else is.
yep.
Mhm.
And then when all those negative consequences add up, some people choose to self-medicate to feel better with substances. Not everybody, but when you work with people who have OCD and SUD, they feed off of each other. If you struggle in one and you have consequences from the OCD, then you have, consequences from the SUD. They feed off of each other, and neither one of them is ever satisfied or tells you the truth.
Mhm. Stephanie says, "What if the false memory is so horrific and could put you in jail?" Uh, there's a weird statement in all of that, though, which is this: it's a false memory. So how could it put you in jail if it's a false memory? How could it actually be so awful and horrible, terrible, if it's not really true? So I don't understand how that could even happen personally. Leo says, any advice on dealing with OCD when dating? I read a lot about our OCD, but less with online dating. Well, I think there's a few areas to go into here, right? First of all, if you are dating someone, when do you choose to maybe reveal that you have OCD, right? Uh, some people might have a guilty aspect to their OCD and say, well, I got to tell them in my profile, because if I don't, then they're going to meet me under false pretenses. And there's other people that might not reveal it for a year or 2 or 3, who knows, before they even do it. I mean, there's people with hoarding who date others who've never had the person come to their home. They've only gone to that other person's home, right, that they're dating, and they've never let anyone inside their own home. So lots of ways to go about it. I don't know that there's any one right way here, and I'm not gonna tell you that there is a right way or not.
No, and I got another one for you.
Okay.
You start to date somebody and they look you up on YouTube and they find out, oh, you have all these things because they're on YouTube talking about it.
Yeah. Sorry if that hurts your dating life, Stacey. My apologies.
Well, hey, it just brings it all out into the open. Like, yep. Then I just look at them and say, yeah, no, that's all true. You heard what I had to say. Now, do you want to go on a roller coaster?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Your favorite thing in the world. How about, yes, I might have OCD, but how do you feel about Disney?
Let's get down to the real deal breakers.
Yes. That is.
No, bye. Moving on.
I could literally see you in a dating thing being like, I'm thrilled that you accept that I have OCD and a substance use disorder, but I cannot date you due to your hatred of Disney.
Deal breaker. And I don't care if you have OCD and SUD and all of that.
No.
You say I hate Disney, there is no need for a second date. We are done.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Joe asks, is OCD basically a lack of being able to live in the present and let our thoughts and feelings flow through us? It's an interesting way to kind of talk about that, right? He says, I feel like OCD literally has me stuck either ruminating about my past or worrying about my future. And that definitely is a great way to describe it, right? OCD doesn't live in the moment, right? OCD does live in the past and worry about how it's going to come back to haunt you. OCD does live in the future, wondering what haven't you figured out yet and how is it going to harm you. And if it is in the present, the thing it's focusing, of course, on in the present is, when is the other shoe going to fall? When is the hammer going to hit? And when, what bad thing is going to be? So I'll agree with you there that there definitely is a lack of ability to stay focused in the moment, in the present, in OCD. And it's more of a not what's going on, it's a what if something were to go on experience. And so even when you are in the present, you're not really focusing on what's happening. You're focusing on the worries you have about what could be happening. That's really what's going on in the situation.
Yes, and being able to be in the present moment, as I said earlier, is a strong skill that takes practice to develop.
Yeah.
And it's part of the recovery process for OCD, SUD, and PTSD. But it takes practice. It's like a muscle.
Right.
You need to flex it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, recovery is not fun, right?
The process of like really stabilizing your recovery, no, really not fun. But
getting there, I'm sure, and being there is much more fun, right?
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But that's another reason that's one of the reasons I talk about it, because I'm both a therapist and somebody with lived experience. But I talk about the lived experience because I've also come to the conclusion that anonymity, which is more of an SUD concept than an OCD treatment concept, but anonymity is the foundation of all our stigma. And if nobody's going to talk about it and stand up and say, yes, I had all these struggles, I have walked this path, been on this journey, and recovery is possible, then people don't have individuals to reach out to and hear that from, because this shit is hard. There's
Yeah,
just no sugarcoating. This is hard work. So people who have gotten to a place of recovery, who are able and willing to advocate and say, yes, this is what it's like to be on the other side. It's not perfect. It doesn't mean my life is all flowers and rosy, and I still have days that I'm just like, but it is so much more than I could have imagined. If somebody sat me down at the beginning of therapy and said, what is your ideal out of this? I would have undershot the target immensely.
sure, sure. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Is OCD genetic? There are genetic and environmental factors that are linked to each other in OCD. So you may have a high genetic predisposition for it, but never get it because you don't have a stressor that kicks it off. You may have a low genetic predisposition, but a massive stressor that potentially kicks it off, and everything else somewhere in the middle. So there's no one answer to, is it 100% genes? Is 100% environment? It's really a mix of the two that we have going. Let's see. Jaron says the concept I might never have the financial ability to recover via specialized therapy has become an extreme obsession of mine, which seems paradoxical. How do I cope with this obsession? Well, um, OCD loves to try to predict the future. And I've only known OCD, you tell me, Stacey, if I'm wrong. I've only known OCD to predict the worst case scenario future. I've never known it to predict the best case scenario. I mean, no one's ever come in my office and said, Dr. McGrath, I'm afraid everyone's going to love me and think I'm awesome. I've treated nobody for that whatsoever. So,
Same here. Absolutely zero.
yeah. So, Darren, we don't know what your financial situation is going to be like in the future. And maybe there will be opportunities that you'll have with a job through insurance where you'll be able to get amazingly specialized care through insurance. I mean, that's one of the founding principles of no CD, why we have sought consistently to get more and more insurance coverage for no CD across the country, because we want treatment to be as affordable as possible. And we continuously work on that more and more to be able to get more people who have insurance to be covered for no CD. And we're not going to stop until everybody is. So that's going to be our goal. If you're not yet, we're working on it. Just know that. So there is that push to be there. But Jared asked, how do you cope with this obsession? Um, one of the things, Jared, or Jaron, is to take a look at what are things that you can do now to start working on OCD that maybe don't have to involve seeing a therapist if that's something that you can't afford right now. And we gave some answers to that earlier today about, watching these webinars, joining a support group. There are goal groups and various things. Go online to the International OCD Foundation. You'll see listings of all of those various things that are available out there. There's great self-help manuals that people can utilize as well too. So I would check all these different areas to see, what kind of program can you create for yourself that could be helpful.
And I'll add the IOCDF has a YouTube channel that has a lot of good talks on various OCD topics.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So there is information out there. There is stuff out there that is available for you to check out and see if maybe that might be a helpful thing for you. Let's see. Were there any other questions? How do you know if it's OCD or if it's just you? Well, if there are intrusive thoughts, images, and urges that we call obsessions, and then you're doing compulsions, mental or physical behaviors to neutralize those, we're pretty sure that that's OCD, right? I don't call that's just you. I call that obsessive compulsive disorder. So if that's what you're doing, and it may feel like that's just you, and maybe your friends and family are like, oh, that's so you. Maybe you actually has a name called OCD is what's really going on in that situation.
And I scrolled back a little bit. Somebody posted, I'm in the process of trying to quit vaping THC, and I realized my intrusive thoughts have decreased by at least 15 to 20%. Is there a correlation? Actually, people don't want to believe me, but a lot of times marijuana, THC is the main psychoactive chemical in marijuana.
Right.
It increases anxiety. So any benefits it has in the short term wear off, and your anxiety ends up going up. It has a very paradoxical effect. And so, yes, if you stop, utilizing it, you may see a reduction over time. People respond to drugs in different ways, and like compulsions, sometimes they can work in the short term. I wouldn't deny that, lived experience.
Right.
But they don't work in the long term.
Yeah.
And in fact, they can actually end up increasing your anxiety over the long term. And when you get into recovery, you can see a reduction in your anxiety because you're not doing this like up and down, high, not high, high, not high. It's really difficult on your body to be in a constant state of, intoxication and then not and up and down. Your body goes through a lot. It creates a lot of stress, which leads to increased anxiety all the way around and increased sometimes cravings and OCD symptoms. So what you think is helping is actually making it worse. But a lot of people don't acknowledge that, or they're not able to until they get into a recovery process for a while.
Right. Well, Stacey, it's been another very fun week getting to hang out with you and do our thing here. Really do appreciate the time, as always.
Yeah, no, same. And don't forget about the website, especially for OCD SUD, www.ocdsud.com. It's got some great resources on it, links to previous webinars here from this channel, and presentations that Dr. McGrath and I have done. So a lot of good information for you or your loved ones who are trying to support you in your recovery process.
Absolutely. We are here on the second Monday of the month, and so we will see you again all in December. Until then, be well, and we look forward to answering more of your questions again next month. We'll talk to you later.